Marvel's Spider-Man was an instant critical and commercial success when it first released back in 2018. The game got an 87 on Metacritic, and alongside it spawned two other successful sequels. The game was remastered for the PS5 in 2020, and that remaster made its way onto PC in 2022. Since its PC release, there have been thousands of interesting mods. One mod that stood out to me was the Peter Must Die mod, which increases enemy speed, enemies' health, enemies' damage, and may also increase your hard dick. Pause. So since I could probably beat the game with this mod without struggle, I wanted to make it more challenging. So that's why I made a no damage rule where I can't take a single hit. If I get hit once, I'll restart to my last checkpoint. So without further ado, let's suffer. For the entirety of the run, I decided to play on NG+, since trying to kill all of Fisk's enemies before the security terminal's time runs out was impossible for me, since the enemies take so long to kill on a fresh save. Nonetheless, the first enemies of the run were effortless, but this would change as my next foes would start clapping my cheeks and give me my first couple restarts of the run.
What do you mean by that?
The rest of Fisk's foes wouldn't face much of a challenge, but Fisk himself would, as he gave me my first few restarts of the run and be the first actual challenge of the run. I then found Shocker caught with his pants down and decided to chase after him. I caught him quite quickly, but he also escaped quite quickly as well. I chased him again, but not without a few restarts in the mix from his air blast. I then caught him, but this wouldn't be the last we'd see of Shocker, as he would be caught with his pants down again trying to rob a bank. But once we had dealt with that, we started to investigate the demon gang. A lot of them would be easy to get through. Using webs and building up my focus bar would be crucial for getting them out of my way. One demon enemy though was not liking me webbing up his friends to oblivion and volunteered to take me out by grabbing me aggressively, making me restart. But by throwing objects at him and using my Go Web ability, I was able to end the suffer I had of his whip. I then finished off the last enemies using various gadgets and webs. After dealing with some of the demon gang, we then have to deal with some MJ stealth, which are definitely my favorite missions in the game. After we get past the mission failure screen, we get to Tombstone's office to find the GPS tracker. After we eat with MJ, we find more info on Charles Standish. To do that, we have to endgame more demon enemies in the street, and then in this parking garage. This guy says we have to find Standish fast, but we don't have time to do things fast. Since we are doing a no damage run with increased enemy damage, we have to take things slow by webbing everyone to the walls, just how I demonstrate it. And so I had to recharge, throw them, they get stuck. Recharge, web them up, throw them, they get stuck. Shoot my web, throw them, they get stuck. After my amazing explanation, we magically get teleported to Bro That Ain't Rhino. Yeah, apparently this fraud Rhino would surprisingly be way stronger than the actual Rhino, since I had to restart my checkpoint a few times to some bullshit like losing health to a Martin Lee enemy from them just hugging you from behind, or the enemies just being really aggressive. So I stayed airborne and tried using Suspension Matrix gadget to keep the enemies stuck in the air, so I could focus on fraud Rhino and finish him off without struggle, and that made it easier. After the Rhino facade, we move on to apprehending Martin Lee, as his demon gang are still wildin', but this time on trucks and not the street. We find the whip demon back in business, but we take him out of business quite quickly with a finisher. We find Martin trying to kill us, but we won't let that happen. As we try taking Martin's briefcase, Martin says "Nah fam," and gives me a new perspective on my life. After this dad talk from him, he spawns us into the hardest fight in the run. I really did have a new perspective on everything after this boss fight. Since the enemy speed is increased inside the mod times 2.5, that means that when the enemies are attacking you, they are also quicker trying to dodge the enemies. With this makes it impossible to stay grounded and fight them, so I stayed airborne and distant away from them, but this still didn't help. Even after swapping suit power, it didn't help. So after 11 restarts, I had to find my own strat to get past this, and I found one that worked for me. It was time consuming, but it worked. I kept defense shield, I climbed up this wall so I could keep dodging in this corner. I kept dodging not only because Martin Lee shoots at you, but because it fills up my focus meter. You need 2 full focus bars for a demon takedown. So what I kept doing was dodging until my defense shield and focus bar was full enough, and then I would activate my defense shield, go down to one of the demon enemies and activate a finisher, and then rinse and repeat that until all the demons were dead. Sometimes I could lure a lot of the demons toward me, and since I was in a corner of a building, there was a building in front of me which I could then web some of the demons to the wall if they were close enough, and they wouldn't be able to hurt me or Martin. So that saved a little bit of time, but it was still time consuming, however. So I eventually killed the last demon and get past that cancerous phase. I then destroyed Martin's mask fairly quickly, and then met Martin in the train to give him a little whooping of my own. I then dodged Martin's blast for the last time, and then finally finish him off, for now. I say for now, but I actually mean right now, since the entire population of the raft have escaped. This includes Martin Lee and the other members of the Sinister Six that we'd have to stop. While chasing Electro up the wall, I made a gamer move of keeping defense shield after the Martin Lee fight, as I could use it against Electro, making me invulnerable to him for the most part. What? Okay, that's bullshit, game. Come on now, you know that's bullshit. It wasn't bullshit. We have a 6-on-1 with the Sinister Six. Dr. Octavius becomes Dr. Octopus and throws us in the endgame. We get found by Yuri later on and transports us to the hospital, but we're Spider-Man. We may have 14 broken bones, but we also have 119 non-broken bones, so we're good. We also just leveled up, which means I got 1 plus health, but I won't be needing it since I'm damageless from these flying buffoons. Yeah, apparently the demons also have jetpacks. Yeah, I don't know. At least they are very easy to kill. So there's that. Taking down the flying monkeys was no problem for me. With my gadgets, I went over to help Miles and Aunt May. After that, I started focusing on finding Otto and stopping his massacre across the city. I isolate this residue to have a clue for Otto. I follow Otto's sperm trail and it leads me to his secret hideout, where we find Icarus, but it was a setup by Otto to get us into position. Sadly, Otto is too dumb for me, but Vulture is probably dumber. As he dragged us across the city, we mate up with Electro, and he just misses us with his blast. I target Electro first, as he is more annoying boss of the two. Sadly, Vulture wants to fight us, so I figure I rough him up a bit. Electro gets a bit ruthless with us, and it causes me to get hit and restart. I would finish off Electro, however, and Vulture wanted to dance with us some more, which was quite funny. After we ended Vulture and Electro, we went over to Scorpion to have a friendly chat. We get to higher ground to analyze Scorpion's upgrade. We head on over to ESU's greenhouse so we can make an antidote. Otto gets trapped in our head and we find the plant that we need for the antidote. Scorpion Tails try to kill us on the way to the next destination. Otto mind becomes schizo and we head back to the lab to mix up the antidote. On the way, I went for a little swim. We start fighting Scorpion, but there are hallucinations. We web them all up until they're grounded and then some sus things start happening. Ignoring all that though, we start our hunt for Rhino, the actual Rhino this time. We find Rhino and beat up his big pussy until Scorpion joins in, and we whip him up until he dies and then Rhino makes us restart. We eventually kill them both, and the only foes that are left are Otto and Lee. We meet up with Lee and he gives a welcoming gift, another dad talk. We then start fighting for the last time. Lee gets worn out of his powers and that's when we strike. We then fight Martin with his demon enemies once again, but they're not as annoying this time. Being airborne in this fight helps a lot more than the other fight. I stayed defensive and attacked Lee when I could. I did that until Lee was Thanos snapped, and the last fight was Dr. Octopus. Being airborne in this fight was not a smart move from me, as I restarted a lot because of it. I stayed grounded and was able to take Otto down with me. Otto then knew my existence was Spider-Man and states that he tried to warn me. I then drag Otto down the side of a building and we have one last brawl. Otto grabs me but I resist his arrest. He did hit me and it was the last hit of the run. After I restarted for one final time, I punched Otto repeatedly until it was over. I had done it. I had beaten Spider-Man Remastered, Peter Must Die difficulty, damageless, and I did it in pride. I hope you all enjoyed watching my extreme gaming capability. Now, subscribe or die.